we're going to talk about Obamacare this morning. Brian Peters is with us. He is Managing Director of Advanced Insurance Strategies, and joining us a little bit later will be Larry Winter from Winter & Scoggins CPAs to get the small business side of this. Brian, it's great to have you back. We've talked about this 2 times before, and each time there's been a great deal of change, and I suspect that's been the case. How much different is it now than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago?
From the law standpoint, there's been some changes, as well as just really the insurance companies and the way they're handling the law and what we're seeing from a marketplace standpoint. So it's ever changing, and I expect it to continue to change for a while.
So the primary changes, I guess this was presented on the front end, more people will be covered and it will be less expensive. Has that come to pass?
Part of it has. The more people being covered definitely has, from a standpoint of the reducing of the uninsured. We've seen more people purchase insurance now through the healthcare.gov, and we really haven't seen a huge drop-off on the employer-sponsored health plan side either. In other words, if you are providing health insurance to your employees, for the most part, you're still seeing that happen. Employers are still seeing that as a benefit to their employees, and they're still providing that coverage. And then we've seen over 10 million people enroll through the healthcare.gov, and that number will continue to grow. And we're seeing is the main reason why, frankly, is most of it's being subsidized to some extent. I believe the latest statistic is about 80% plus of the people signing up through healthcare.gov are getting some assistance to do so. And so from that standpoint, they are. Now the premiums themselves, you mentioned about the, it being cheaper or less expensive, we're not seeing that. Now if you're being subsidized and part of the premium is being paid for, then it will appear cheaper to you, but the actual cost of the insurance across the board, whether you be an individual or an employer, has gone up.
Have I read someplace that there's a great deal of the people that are being subsidized are being subsidized through Medicaid? Is that accurate?
In some states, they've expanded Medicaid. Georgia is not one of them. So in some states now, it's easier to qualify as a Medicaid beneficiary in those states. So that is a lot of the new uninsured reduction is because of the Medicaid expansion. But in a lot of states that hasn't happened, Georgia being one of them. So we locally haven't seen any of that, but nationwide there has been.
And there's a great deal of people then
That
being covered via Medicaid?
Yes, throughout the country, just not through, and it was already, but that just expanded when it became easier to qualify for Medicaid. Okay. Like I said, but in our state that hasn't happened.
Now, originally the idea was to have a state exchange. And there are still some of those, but that didn't seem to pan out as planned either, did it?
Right, most of them were federal exchanges, and the one, I guess, thing that could have happened that would have changed that potentially was the actual court case, where if it had been determined that you wouldn't qualify for subsidies unless you purchased through a state exchange, if that had been upheld, that case, then we would have seen a major shift. You would have seen states probably scrambling to become state exchanges, so their individuals in their state could have qualified for these subsidies, but I don't remember the exact number on the decision. But that case was not successful, and it continued to be federal exchanges continued to be available to individuals to receive subsidies. So we're not seeing a change there.
So on the front end, when this was being discussed and prior to passing in Congress, a lot of debate, a lot of hue and cry about what was going to happen with this, what form it would take. How much different is it now from the day this was passed back, what was that, 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, 2010. So, well, what I would say to that is that the law itself, there hasn't been that much of a change or that many changes to the law. What we've had is a delay in implementing all of the law, and we're still seeing that. In other words, there's still parts of the law, in my opinion, a lot of the law that people are not going to like, especially business folks, because of the effect it'll have on their premiums, has been delayed. And we're continuing to see delays, and those delays will occur till 2017 in some cases for small businesses. So those haven't been fully implemented. So the law itself hasn't changed very much, but it just all hasn't been implemented at this point due to some of these delays that have happened.
So then when the rest of this law will be enacted, how will that change the world as we know it?
Yeah. It'll change mostly for small businesses. Right now, most small businesses have been able to still keep the health plan that they've had for the most part. Some insurance companies, due to their discretion, may have reduced or eliminated some plans. But for the most part, they're still able to have plans that were similar to what they had before, and more importantly, the pricing mechanism is still set up the same way as before, which is, as a small employer, your rates are somewhat based on your own employees' health. In other words, there's still some factors that are controlled overall by the insurance company, but your own employees' health can impact your rates positively or negatively. Under the new health care law, once it's fully implemented, there will be community rating across the board, where anybody in the same area with the same insurance company will get the same rates if their employees are the same age as the business down the street. And when that happens, you're going to see from most people an increase in pricing because the average community rate is higher than what they were paying under the current mechanism of rating.
So then for a local employer, how will that change how he views this whole thing and how he reacts to it?
Well, initially, obviously, if they're one of the 80% that will see an increase in price, they'll be looking for folks like myself and other advisors locally or wherever they're dealing with somebody to come up with another solution, because just delivering a 30 or 40% increase in your for a plan that's similar to what you had the year before typically is not going to be acceptable to most employers.
What are the options for another solution?
You're going to have a couple different options. Some smaller employers, probably 5 lives and under, maybe 10 and under, will look at, does it make sense just to get out of insuring our employees through the company? In other words, if we just increased their salary, they earn more money, and we said we don't provide health insurance, it's one of our benefits here at the company, could those people go out and get a plan, similar in price or maybe less expensive? I think you're going to see, more importantly, the ones that still want to provide insurance to their employees and consider that a benefit, and their employees consider it a benefit. They'll be looking at some of these what are called level funded options, where you basically technically become a self-insured employer with a lot of protections to eliminate a lot of the negative aspects of self-insurance. And with that, you're able to go back to the old or current mechanism of rating, where your employees will still affect your pricing based on their own health.
Okay. Now, the coverage that people have, now there's two groups as I see them: people that didn't have coverage before this was enacted and people that did have coverage. Talk about each of those two groups and the coverage they have now as compared with what they had before.
Okay, that's probably one misconception of healthcare reform. You see a lot of media attention to the folks that didn't have coverage, that now have coverage, that their plans are not very good. Frankly, they're very similar to what was out there before. In other words, if anything, the new healthcare law has reduced the deductibles and the out-of-pocket maximums that could have been applied in some of these plans. In other words, you can't buy a plan with as high of a deductible as you used to be able to. We had some employees or individuals come in that actually wanted to buy $10,000, $20,000 deductibles, believe it or not, $20,000, $30,000 out-of-pocket maximums. You can't purchase those plans anymore; they don't exist. But there still are $5,000, $6,000 deductible plans. There still are plans with family plans with $12,000, $13,000 deductibles, and the same for out-of-pocket maximums, about the same. Those plans are there, and so you see a lot of people talking about they've got a plan that was inexpensive, but it doesn't cover a whole lot. It's like anything else. The plans are available that cover more. They're just more expensive, and what we're seeing is the uninsured individuals that are purchasing plans now, and we do a lot of this at our office. The price point is such that they're having to buy these high deductible plans that don't offer as much coverage as maybe where they could have worked before, where the employer offered a lower deductible plan. So those folks that didn't have coverage are purchasing it, but they're still purchasing pretty basic plans because they're able to get those. And we kind of use the $100 mark as a point where most of them are able to get a plan under $100. The folks that were insured previously, what differences are they seeing now? Primarily on the price side. They're just, depending on their age and whether they are male or female, we're seeing significant increases for folks to basically purchase the same plan that they had the year before. It's just costing more.
The people that didn't have insurance.
Right. With a few exceptions. Females especially in the childbearing years, are getting a little bit of a break because now everybody pays for maternity cost, not just females, so they're seeing a little break under the health care reform. And then frankly, older individuals, because of the restriction on the age discrepancy between the youngest and the oldest in an age band, they're actually seeing, in some cases, a little bit of a break. Not much, but they're seeing a little bit of a cost reduction. But everybody else is pretty much paying more.